What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be going through a few quick tips on how to improve your win ratio in the Gulag and get back out there into the Warzone. Now, I was planning on making this a few weeks back, but the Gulag loadouts did just change, meaning now there are only weapons within the sniper and marksman classes, which has obviously taken it from being really fast paced back to being pretty slow like it was with the pistols. So like I said, we're just going to quickly go through a few small tips that might improve your chances of winning, so be sure to hit that like button if these tips do end up helping you out, and if you are new then consider subscribing with those notifications on. So the first tip I'm going to give you is to make sure that your game plan changes depending on what weapon you're given. With the assault rifles and the SMGs that were previously in the Gulag, obviously you could pretty much use the same tactics every time since each gun pretty much handles the same. However, now the weapons are all very different. For example, there's the HDR, the AX50 and the Dragunov, which all have their regular scopes on them, meaning you sort of need to play them a tiny bit slower, whereas on the other side of that, the SKS, the crossbow, the MK2 and the Kar98 all have their iron sights, meaning you can play them a tiny bit more aggressive. There is also then the class which is literally just your fist and a throwing knife, and obviously this is just kind of hit and miss. The point is that each weapon does handle differently now, and you do need to get an idea of your strategy for each weapon and then quickly understand what that strategy is as soon as you know what gun you have, so that you can act quickly as soon as the fight starts. Now, with the scoped weapons, so the HDR, the AX50 and the Dragunov, you obviously need to try and just slow down a little bit with these ones and keep an eye on the longer angles of the map, as generally speaking your enemy is likely going to be doing the same thing, and this gives you the best chance for a fair, evenly balanced 1v1. If you do feel confident enough with your aim at that distance, then that's probably your best bet. However, if you're not quite as confident, then it can actually be better to pull out your fists and try to get closer to the enemy. If you do decide to go with this kind of tactic, sprint straight away and try and gain as much ground as possible, otherwise the enemy might already get set up before you even get to them, leading to an easy kill for the enemy. So if you are going to go for the melee kill, you definitely need to act very quickly. Now, that alone is actually a pretty solid tip, honestly, that you actually need to know what you're going to do straight away rather than panicking at the start of the round and being unsure of what the game plan is. As soon as you see what weapon you've got, you need to decide your game plan straight away and then execute it as fast and efficiently as you can. In my own experience, and keep in mind that it is different for everyone, but in my experience I always do better in the Gulag when I take the fight to the enemy rather than sitting and waiting for them to make the first move. If I'm making the first move, I know exactly what I'm going to do, and therefore I can do it straight away, whereas if I sit in the back corner ADSing hoping that they'll come down the lane, then 1, it might not happen, 2, they might get a different angle on me that I can't see and take me out, or 3, they might rush me and get behind me without me knowing. In all of those situations, there's one thing that they all have in common: I don't know what the enemy is going to do. So, if you are confident enough in your skills, then I would definitely recommend to be the aggressor and make the first move. That doesn't mean just always sprinting at your enemy, but more just getting to the stronger positions on the map and taking control rather than letting them do the work, because if you do decide that, then you're pretty much just betting on them being bad enough to lose the fight by their own fault. If they're decent and they make the first move, then more often than not they will win the fight. Now, with that being said, letting the enemy make the first move doesn't mean you're automatically going to lose, it just puts you on the back foot, but if you do set up properly, then it is still a tactic that can work. What I'd recommend though is to not just focus on one side of the map assuming that that's where they'll go, rather to find somewhere that you can kind of patrol each lane just enough that you'll know where they are, and at that point it is again a pretty evenly matched 1v1 since you'll both see each other at the same time. Like I said though, at least in my opinion, this is the much harder and riskier play, so if you are going to let them come to you, you definitely need to make sure you're paying attention to all areas of the map. Now, getting back to the actual weapons, like I mentioned, the scoped weapons are for playing a little bit slower. However, the faster rate of fire weapons like the Kar98, the MK2 or the SKS specifically can be played much more aggressively, and honestly I think that's how they should be played. Generally speaking, most of the players you come up against in the Gulag are going to be not the best players in the lobby, keyword generally speaking, but I'd say that maybe 60 to 70% of your Gulag fights will be against players who aren't the best, and in most of those cases the players who aren't quite as good will generally lack a bit of confidence too, causing them to panic or be unsure of their specific game plan like I touched on earlier. This means that if you do have a weapon like the Kar98 for example, it's going to be somewhat daunting to a lot of players, but in actual fact this thing is a one-hit kill with no scope on it and a really fast ADS speed, making it not all that different from a semi-automatic assault rifle, and if you do have the confidence in your skill to treat it that way, that alone is going to give you the edge. When I get something like the Kar98 or the MK2, I generally go incredibly aggressive because I know the enemy is more often than not going to be freaking out about having to use a bolt action or a lever action in close quarters, so by me playing the Chaos Ball and being really aggressive, sprinting around them and jumping around corners or sliding, that's going to make them panic even more than they were already, and at that point, unless I get unlucky, generally they're going to lose the fight simply because they're panicking. Obviously, once again, it does come down to skill level and confidence level. If you're not confident enough to play aggressively, then that's absolutely fine. We all start out somewhere, but it is definitely something I would work on over time if you do get the chance, because at least from my own experience, the more aggressive player wins more often than the hesitant player, so long as the aggressive player is smart about it. Now, my last tip, which is a really simple one, is literally just to pay attention to what works and what doesn't. If you play super aggressive and it works well, keep doing it. If you play super aggressive and you can't manage to win a single Gulag, then obviously slow it down and try something else. I've known a few people to do really well most of the time, but then they get unlucky, lose say 3 in a row using their normal tactic, and then change it up only to get worse and worse. If you lose a few times in a row, don't feel like you need to change your playstyle just because of those losses. You simply will lose Gulag fights no matter how good or bad you are. So unless it's like constantly losing every single time, then there's no rush at all to change things up. But guys, that is going to do it for this one. At the end of the day, there's only so many tips for the Gulag, as it really is just a matter of killing your enemy before they kill you. So there's not all that much to it, but hopefully these tips can help some of you out. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.